You wake before the sun, the cold already seeping into your bones. There is no rooster, no bell, only the quiet shift of wind through thatched roofs and the slow creak of old wood adjusting to the chill. The fire has long gone out, and the coals are just a faint orange smear in the ashes. You don't rush. You never do. Time here doesn't rush you either. You sit up on the straw mattress, careful not to disturb the sleeping form beside you. The blanket, rough wool patched over the years, falls away, and the cold bites harder. Your feet find the packed dirt floor, familiar as your own breath, and for a moment you listen. To the house, to the silence, to the faint drip of moisture from a corner where the roof leaks. There's peace in this stillness, a kind of simplicity the outside world forgot long ago. Your boots are stiff. They don't fit properly anymore, but you mend them when you can. Slipping them on, you step outside. The village is still, just slumped shapes of huts and chimney smoke barely rising. The air smells of wet earth, old ash, and livestock, distant but ever present. A low fog clings to the ground, turning everything ghost-like. This village doesn't have a name, or if it ever did, no one remembers it now. It lies tucked in a shallow dip between the forest and the hills, a forgotten crease in a land that's always been overlooked. There are no maps, no banners, no roads, just a foot-worn track that vanishes into the trees. You've lived your whole life here. Everyone has. Today will be like yesterday, and like tomorrow, but still there's a quiet sort of comfort in that. The fire needs kindling, the goats need feeding, the frost on the edge of the well will need breaking. Tasks, rhythms, the slow, steady march of survival, none of it exciting, but all of it necessary. Your fingers are already numb when you reach the woodpile, frosted logs stacked like memories beside the cottage wall. You break the silence with your breath, a pale cloud that vanishes quickly. The axe is dull, but you know its weight by heart. Each strike is a beat in the rhythm of your life. Not fast, not loud, just steady. The sun finally touches the far edge of the fields, casting a low gold light across the frost. The grass sparkles for a moment before melting. You catch sight of old Margie moving toward the well, hunched and wrapped in shawls, carrying that same dented tin bucket she's used for decades. You nod. She doesn't nod back. She never does. But she sees you. That's enough. The village wakes slowly. A dog barks once. A child wails, hungry or cold or both. Somewhere, a cow moans, demanding attention. The day begins, not with a bang but a shuffle. You carry the firewood inside, your arms burning, and carefully stack it near the hearth. The coals are coaxed back to life with dry moss and your breath. Flame returns like an old friend, sullen, warm, and quiet. The pot still has stew in it from last night, or maybe the night before. You add water and a pinch of something from the hanging bundles of herbs. It's not for taste. It's to keep away rot. Breakfast isn't eaten sitting down. It's done while walking, working, mending. A scrap of bread, hard and uneven. A sip of broth too hot to gulp. That's enough. By midday, the sky turns from pale gray to something darker. Not a storm, just the usual heaviness that comes with winter's breath. You've lived through 17 of them, maybe more. No one's sure. Birthdays aren't marked, only the passing of seasons and the wear on your hands. You work the field even though nothing grows this time of year. The soil must still be turned, stones pulled, roots cut. Your back aches before long, but that's expected. Pain is a part of the pattern here, like wind, like hunger, like the way your name sounds only when whispered. A few villagers pass now and then. Tom, the elder, nods once, his beard rimed with frost. He once spoke to a monk. That made him the wisest man in the village, not because of what was said, just because he saw something beyond the trees. It's enough. A young boy trails behind his mother, dragging a stick through the dirt. He waves. You wave back. He smiles as if you've shared a great secret. In a way, you have. There are no schools here, no taverns, no written records, no future really, beyond the next meal and the next freeze. The boundaries of your world are defined by familiarity. This tree, that stone, the bend in the creek, the stump where someone once saw a fox. That's enough. The river lies to the north. You've never seen it, only heard about it from those who knew someone who once fished there. It may not exist, or it may be as wide as a dream. Either way, it's not meant for you. Evening settles like a sigh. The sky bleeds purple and orange before folding into dark. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys. Lamps are lit with care. Oil is precious. Shadows grow long and settle into corners where they'll rest until morning. Dinner is a repeat of lunch, which was a repeat of yesterday. The same stew, the same bread, the same faces across the firelight. But the quiet is welcome. Words are few. What's left to say? You sit near the fire after, hands outstretched, soaking in what little heat remains. A dog lies near your feet. Yours? Maybe. It comes and goes. Like most things. A knock on the door is rare. You turn slowly. It's Elric, the tanner's son, asking if your roof still leaks near the back. You nod. He says he can patch it tomorrow. You thank him. He shrugs. That's the exchange. No coin. No promise. Just knowing. Just doing. Later, lying on your back, you stare at the low ceiling beams. Smoke stains. Spider webs. Familiar shapes you've memorized over the years. You listen. Not for danger, but for life. The soft shifting of wood. The wind against the wall. A sheep bleeding somewhere too far off. And you sleep. Not deeply, not safely, just enough. The night passes without incident. It usually does. The next day comes quietly, like a footstep you almost didn't hear. There's no real sunrise, only the gradual lifting of shadow, the gentle graying of the sky as the frost thins on the ground. You open your eyes to cold air, the smell of wood smoke still clinging to your skin and hair. Your breath forms small clouds in the dimness. The fire has died again, and you already know your toes will ache when they hit the floor. But there's no hesitation. You rise, because that's what you do. Because life here doesn't wait for comfort. Outside, the earth is hard underfoot. A thin sheen of ice laces the puddles, and the chickens huddle in silence under their coop. You pour out the water you brought inside the night before, now cold but not frozen. You crack a few eggs, small, misshapen, but precious, and stir them into the pan above your slowly growing fire. The first voice you hear is Marith's. She lives 3 houses down, the one with the leaning door and the black dog that growls at everything. She's already arguing with her brother. About what, you don't know. Maybe something broke, maybe something disappeared, or maybe it's just another cold morning and they're both tired of it. You understand. By midday, the clouds gather again. It might snow, but then again it might not. Weather here doesn't follow rules. You wrap your shawl tighter and set out toward the tree line. There's firewood to be gathered, not chopped, just gathered. Branches fallen in the last wind, dry enough to burn. The forest is quiet. It always is in winter. The birds have left, and even the wind makes less noise, as if muffled by the trees. Your feet crunch along a narrow trail you know by memory, stepping over roots and between low brambles. You move slowly, carefully, eyes scanning for anything useful. Bark, dry twigs, old pine cones. You find what you need and a little more, enough to last 2, maybe 3 days. You pause by a tree marked with an old scar, a long diagonal slash in the bark, darkened and widened with time. You remember your grandfather telling you a storm did that, years before you were born. The way he spoke, it sounded like the storm had teeth and a voice. You believed him. Sometimes you still do. On your way back, you pass a shape in the snow. A rabbit, small and still, barely breathing. Its leg is twisted under it, caught, maybe, or broken in a fall. You kneel, slow, careful not to spook it. It doesn't move, doesn't run. It knows. You lift it gently, wrap it in part of your scarf. It doesn't struggle. At home, you set it near the hearth, just outside the reach of the flame. It watches you with wide, dark eyes. You crush a few dried leaves into warm water and place the bowl beside it. You don't know if it will survive, but you try. That night, While the wind taps on the shutters like a restless child, you lie awake listening to the rabbit breathe. Shallow, unsteady, but still there. The next morning, it's dead. You wrap it in linen and bury it beside the small patch of garden, the place where nothing has grown in 3 years. You mark the spot with a stone, just a stone. You don't speak, there's no need. But something inside you folds a little, like paper bending at the edge. The days blur. You repair a fence, you carry water, you patch the roof with straw that doesn't quite hold. You help Marith chase her chickens after one of them bolts into the woods. You laugh. Once. Quietly. You fix a pot with twine and pitch. You find a beetle in your soup and flick it away without thinking. You carry a neighbor's child after she slips on the path. You feel her little hands grip your collar as if you're the last stable thing in the world. Maybe you are. On the 7th day, the snow returns. It starts light, flakes the size of dust, then thicker, heavier, the kind that sticks. You step outside and tilt your face to the sky. It's not beautiful, not really, but it's honest. And in that, you find something close to peace. The village becomes muffled again. Sounds vanish into white. The world shrinks to arm's reach. Inside, the fire becomes your sun. You sit close. You rub your hands. You cook slowly, letting the warmth seep into the walls. You start carving again. Wood shavings curl like feathers onto the floor. You shape a spoon, a comb, a child's toy, a little horse with 2 big legs. You don't know why. Maybe for the neighbor's boy. Maybe just to keep your hands busy. You catch yourself humming. A tune with no name, no words. Just a memory, drifting up like smoke. That night, you dream of green fields, of warm water, of voices calling your name, not to warn you, not to summon you, but just to say hello. When you wake, the fire is still burning. You take that as a sign. One evening, as twilight stretches like wool over the hills, you see a figure standing at the edge of the village. Tall, still, watching. They don't move. They just stand. You watch them too. The wind shifts. They turn. And then they're gone. No one else saw them. You don't mention it. But that night, you sleep with the door barred. Your dreams begin to change. You see faces you don't remember, voices you've never heard, a road that leads past the edge of the forest and into something vast and blue. Sometimes you wake with your hands clenched around the blanket, your chest heavy, but there's no fear, only distance. You shake it off. You rise. You move. Because that's what life is. That's what you are. The wind doesn't let up for days. It whistles through the narrow lanes of the village, claws at the eaves of every roof, pushes smoke sideways from every chimney. You've nailed the shutters tighter, laid stones along the thatch to keep it down, but still the cold comes through. Your hands are cracked. The skin splits when you flex your fingers too quickly. You wrap them in cloth, smear them with animal fat. It helps. A little. The snow piles higher. The path to the well is now a trench. The trees are bowed under the weight, their branches sighing with every gust. You no longer bother with the woods. There's nothing left to gather. The ground is asleep, and you are beginning to feel the same. Then one morning, you wake to quiet. Not silence, that's something different, but the hush of a world between breaths. The wind has gone. The sky, for once, is clear, pale blue, like washed-out cloth, with a sun that barely warms your cheek, but still manages to glint across every surface. You step outside. The snow is higher than your knees. Your first steps are slow, cautious, but you go on. Others are out too. A few neighbors clear their doorways, scoop out paths. Marith is hurling curses at her shovel. Tom leans on his stick and shakes his head, muttering about the winters of his youth when snow reached the eaves and wolves came down from the hills. You've never seen a wolf. But today, you believe in them. You spend hours helping clear a path to the well. No one asks you to. No one tells you not to. It's just what's done. One by one, others join you. The path widens. The air fills with the sound of labor, grunts, snow scraping, muffled curses. It becomes a kind of music. By the time the sun dips low again, the trench to the well is deep and firm. People gather for water like bees around a flower. They laugh. Just a little. Just enough to remind you that warmth isn't only found in fire. That night, you're invited to Tom's fire, a rare thing. The old man usually keeps to himself, more shadow than neighbor. But he beckons you in with a nod and a grunt, and you step into a space that smells of smoke, leather, and boiled roots. He talks. About his mother, who once walked 6 days to find salt. About the night the sky turned red from the far-off war no one ever saw. About a traveling piper who vanished in the woods and left music behind in the trees. You listen, not because you believe everything, but because stories are the closest thing to magic that exists here. When you leave, he places something in your hand, a little copper disc, worn smooth on one side. It belonged to someone once, he says. Now it's yours. You keep it. You don't know why, but you keep it. Spring comes quietly, not all at once, just a softening, a melting. The snow recedes a little each day, revealing mud, dead grass, broken tools lost months ago. The wind still bites, but it no longer has teeth. The air smells different now, like promise. You plant again, turn soil that still remembers ice. Sow seeds saved from last year, each one a gamble. Peas, barley, onions. You pray over them in your own way, not with words, just with hope. A calf is born in the next cottage. You help pull it free. It struggles, then breathes, then stands. Wobbly, wet, alive. You feel the thrum of life in your fingertips. Children appear again, muddy and laughing, trailing sticks, chasing dogs. Someone finds a bird's nest, points at the pale blue eggs. You smile. You'd forgotten you could. One morning, you find the copper disc Tom gave you has vanished. You search your pockets, your bed, the corners of the hearth. It's nowhere. You wonder if it left on its own. The forest returns to sound. Birdsong, leaves rustling, the buzz of insects. You walk deeper now, past your usual paths, seeking out new branches to cut, bark to peel. You find a tree you don't remember. Tall, split in the middle, moss-grown and hollow. You sit beside it, resting your back, closing your eyes. You dream again, not of people but of places. A road lined with lanterns, a hill covered in glass, a river that sings. You wake with a start. The sun has moved. Your legs are stiff. The birds have stopped singing. You walk home faster than usual. That night, you hear something howl, low, far, but real. You sleep with a knife under your blanket. A traveler comes through, a woman, wrapped in wool, riding a donkey. Her hair is braided, her voice strange. She says she's from the coast. No one here has seen the sea. No one even knows which direction it lies. She trades salt for eggs, thread for stories. When she asks for a place to sleep, the village hesitates. You offer your hearth. She tells you tales of ships that float on black water, of cities built on stone arches, of fires that never die. You ask her what lies beyond the forest. She says, another forest, and then a road, and then a world. She leaves at dawn. You feel changed, though you've not moved an inch. You start walking farther, not every day, but often. You explore. A ridge you've never climbed, a pond you didn't know existed, a hill with a tree shaped like an old man's cane. You see things, footprints too large for any villager, a cairn of stones with no purpose, feathers strung along a branch. The forest holds secrets, and for the first time, you want to know them. You speak to no one about it, but sometimes in your dreams, the forest speaks back. Then comes the fire. By the time the sun dips low again, the trench to the well is deep and firm. People gather for water like bees around a flower. They laugh. Just a little. Just enough to remind you that warmth isn't only found in fire. That night, you're invited to Tom's fire, a rare thing. The old man usually keeps to himself, more shadow than neighbor. But he beckons you in with a nod and a grunt, and you step into a space that smells of smoke, leather, and boiled roots. He talks about his mother, who once walked 6 days to find salt. About the night the sky turned red from the far-off war no one ever saw. About a traveling piper who vanished in the woods and left music behind in the trees. You listen, not because you believe everything, but because stories are the closest thing to magic that exists here. When you leave, he places something in your hand, a little copper disc, worn smooth on one side. It belonged to someone once, he says. Now it's yours. You keep it. You don't know why, but you keep it. Spring comes quietly, not all at once, just a softening, a melting. The snow recedes a little each day, revealing mud, dead grass, broken tools lost months ago. The wind still bites, but it no longer has teeth. The air smells different now, like promise. You plant again. Turn soil that still remembers ice. Sow seeds saved from last year, each one a gamble. Peas, barley, onions. You pray over them in your own way, not with words, just with hope. A calf is born in the next cottage. You help pull it free. It struggles, then breathes, then stands, wobbly, wet, alive. You feel the thrum of life in your fingertips. Children appear again, muddy and laughing, trailing sticks, chasing dogs. Someone finds a bird's nest, points at the pale blue eggs. You smile. You'd forgotten you could. One morning, you find the copper disc Tom gave you has vanished. You search your pockets, your bed, the corners of the hearth. It's nowhere. You wonder if it left on its own. The forest returns to sound. Birdsong, leaves rustling, the buzz of insects. You walk deeper now, past your usual paths, seeking out new branches to cut, bark to peel. Late in the season, after the second planting, a cottage, Marith's, struck by lightning during a sudden storm. The sky had opened like an angry god. Her roof caught fast. You're the first to see it. You run, shouting, arms flailing, voice ragged. Others follow. Buckets are filled, thrown, blankets soaked. The fire laughs at all of it. But you don't stop. No one does. By nightfall, the cottage is blackened but standing. Marith cries for a pot she lost, an old one, inherited, unremarkable. You place a hand on her shoulder. You don't say anything. You just stay. That night, no one sleeps well. The village is quiet again, not peaceful, just quiet. The next morning, the air smells of smoke and wet ash. Marith sits outside her charred doorway, wrapped in a blanket that smells like sheep, her eyes distant. You bring her a bowl of hot porridge with honey, not because you have much, but because it feels like the right thing. She nods when you hand it to her but says nothing. No one really talks that day. It takes time to move forward after fire. You work in the fields again. The soil is rich now, heavy with promise. The barley is sprouting, little green blades rising like soldiers from the earth. You crouch and run your fingers over the leaves. It's the smallest gesture of faith, to plant something and believe it will grow. In the evening, you walk past the pond again. The surface is still mirror-like, holding the whole sky in its quiet. You toss a pebble and watch the rings ripple outward, breaking the world into soft fragments. A dragonfly flits past your cheek. You think of that strange traveler and her tales of the sea. You wonder if it's real. You wonder if anything is. A few days later, there's a celebration, the Feast of First Fruit. Not because there's much fruit, but because tradition demands it. The children decorate their heads with flowers, real and made from dyed cloth. Old Menric carves a flute from an elder branch and plays a tune no one remembers the name of. You help build the fire, a proper one this time, not an accident, not an enemy. There's dancing, not well, not graceful, but with joy. You don't join at first, but when someone grabs your hand and pulls you in, you don't resist. You spin, you laugh. The sky turns pink, then indigo, then black. Stars bloom above you like frost. You fall asleep beside the fire, warm from both flame and company. You wake to find someone has covered you with their shawl. You don't know who. You don't ask. One morning you find a new track in the mud, too small for a deer, Too round for a fox. You crouch, run your fingers over it. The print is fresh, not more than an hour old. You follow it for a few steps, then stop. Something about it prickles your skin. Not fear, just awareness. You return home more slowly than usual. That night, the wind carries a howl again, closer than before. You sit by the fire with your back to the door, a blade resting across your knees. Nothing comes, but you don't sleep easily. Summer rises like a slow tide. The fields are full. The days are long. The sun climbs higher than it has in years. Your skin darkens. Your arms grow stronger. You sweat through every shirt you own, and by now you've patched most of them twice. Children swim in the stream again. You sit under the shade of a tree and watch. They laugh, splash, chase dragonflies. You feel something in your chest. Not quite envy, not quite sorrow. Just the echo of something you used to have. You remember your own childhood. The way your father laughed. The rhythm of your mother's hands on dough. The way the world used to seem endless. It still is. You just forgot how to see it. One day, while walking the far woods, you find an old ruin. Stone walls crumbled into moss. A doorway still standing with no house behind it. Roots growing through what might once have been a floor. It's quiet here, heavier somehow. Sacred maybe, or just forgotten. You sit on the old threshold. You close your eyes, and you hear it. Not sound exactly, but memory. Voices without words. Footsteps without direction. A warmth that doesn't come from the sun. You open your eyes again. The forest feels different now. More alive. Or maybe you are. The harvest comes early this year. You work dawn to dusk, scythe in hand, calluses grown thick. Grain by grain the field shrinks. The storehouse fills. There's laughter again. Real laughter. The kind that bubbles from the chest, not just the mouth. You trade your surplus for salt and wool. You get new boots, a proper blade, a book with no pictures, full of stories in a language you barely know. You study it by firelight, sounding out each word. The villagers think it's strange. You don't mind. You want to understand not just the book, the world. That winter the wolves come. Not many, just one at first. You see it at dusk, across the field, dark against the snow, eyes like burning stones. It watches, then disappears into the tree line. You tell the others. They believe you. The next night, they light fires around the village, hang bones and ash and charms from their doors. The old rituals return, pulled from memory like old cloaks from trunks. The wolf does not return, but no one sleeps deeply for a week. Neither do you. Time passes again. Slow, steady, quiet. You carve more. You teach the neighbor's boy to read. You build a better coop for Marith's chickens. You help repair the village well with stone and tar. You laugh more often. You dream less often. The forest still calls sometimes, but now you wait before answering. One cold evening, Tom dies, peacefully, in his sleep. Just doesn't wake up. The village gathers. His stories are told again, softer this time, like prayer. You carve a marker for his grave, not fancy, just solid, something that will last. As you place it in the earth, you feel something settle. Not grief, not exactly, just the shape of time. After the burial, you find the copper disc again, sitting on your hearth. You smile. You don't question it. You carry it with you now, always. The boy brings you a shell, a small one, white and ridged, still smelling faintly of salt. He says, "The trader had it. Said it came from a place called the sea." You take it gently. You turn it over in your hands, hold it to your ear, and for the first time you believe, not just in the sea, but in everything, in distant stars and invisible roots, and memories you never lived. You press the shell to your chest and close your eyes. The boy waits patiently beside you. You hand it back to him and say, "Keep it. One day you'll go." He grins. You both sit quietly, the shell between you. listening. Your hands shake sometimes now, knuckles swollen, joints stiff. You no longer split wood like you once did. The boy helps now. So do the others. They bring you food, ask for your stories, not the kind in books, the kind only you remember. You tell them, softly, slowly, with pauses that stretch longer than they used to. They listen closely, as if your words are the embers of something important. You never say you're tired, but they know. One night, you wake before dawn. You don't know why. You dress, step outside, and walk, past the fields, past the pond, into the woods. The trees whisper your name, or maybe just creak in the wind. You touch bark like skin. Sit once more by the ruins. The moss glows faintly in the moonlight. You feel seen. The copper disc in your pocket warms slightly. You close your eyes, and when you open them, the sun is rising. You smile and begin the walk home. The days grow shorter again. Your steps slower, but everything tastes sweeter. Bread, air, berries on the trail. The boy reads to you now, stumbles over the hard words, but keeps going. You correct him only when he asks. You carve your last symbol, a spiral inside a sun, and hang it above your door. The boy asks what it means. You tell him, it means I'll see you again. He doesn't understand. Not yet. But he nods and stays quiet. Your final dream is gentle. You walk a path through mist, not toward anything, just through. There are stones underfoot and the scent of pine in the air. A deer passes you, unafraid. A bird sings a melody you somehow know. At the end of the path, there is a door made of light. You don't open it, you just rest beside it. The dream fades. You wake one last time, not afraid, just quiet. You look around your home, the wood beams, the flickering fire, the carvings hanging from the ceiling, and you close your eyes. They bury you beside the stream. The boy carves the marker. He does a good job. Simple, lasting. He places the shell beneath it and walks back slowly to the village. He will tell your stories. Not all the words, but the feeling, the way you looked at the sky, the way you listened to trees, the way you smiled with your whole face. And so the world goes on. The fields bloom again. New voices echo in the village square. Babies cry, fires burn, bread rises, rain falls, and somewhere, far away, a traveler stands on a cliff overlooking the sea and thinks of a story someone once told them. A story about silence and time, and the way a single life can echo like wind through leaves. The world doesn't remember your name, but it remembers your footsteps, and it will carry them forward long after even the trees forget.